Hello and welcome to another episode of the TransitMatters podcast in partnership with CommonWealth magazine. My name is Josh Fairchild. I'm the president of TransitMatters, and I'm joined with my co-host,
Jim Aloisi, a board member of TransitMatters.
Today we've brought a guest from the state Senate, Senator Brendan Crighton, Democrat from the 3rd Essex, covering Lynn, Swampscott, Saugus, and Linfield. Is that about covered?
Marblehead and Nahant as well. We can't.
Oh yes, let's get them all. And
you said Linfield too, right?
Yes, I said
Okay,
Linfield.
right.
Yeah, and the Linwoods Reservation. Chair of the Housing Committee, Vice Chair of Economic Development. Any others that you want to throw in there?
Yeah, public health as well as mental health and substance misuse, those are the big ones.
All right. Well, we are here to talk about transportation, actually. So that's what we wanted to bring you in and talk about, mostly because Phase 1 of Regional Rail, the vote that was approved by, or the resolutions that were passed by the Fiscal Management Control Board of the MBTA back in early November, include three of the commuter rail lines to be phased in as regional rail, which is kind of the vision that has been recognized by the FMCB to provide fast, frequent, all-day electrified service along the commuter rail lines, beginning with the Providence-Stoughton line, the Fairmount line, and what they're calling the EJ corridor up to Lynn, and improvements along that line. So we're excited to talk about that.
Yeah, and I'm personally excited, Senator, to have you here. You know, those of us who've been a while in the transportation advocacy community know that the senator from Lynn always has had a large or an outsized role in transportation policy making, and I know you worked with former chairman of the Transportation Committee, McGee, now Mayor McGee, for many years, and we're delighted that you're basically following in those footsteps and taking leadership positions in areas that are really important, not just to your district, but to the region. And so I'm really happy to have you here and to also let people know that you're taking on this important issue as one that really is not just something that will improve our lives today, but really be impactful for the future. The whole excitement that we have experienced recently coming from the Fiscal Management and Control Board's decision to adopt a regional rail vision with a Phase 1 that made, to us, a lot of sense. It's really exciting. I know that this month the general manager is supposed to come back to the Fiscal Management Control Board with a plan for a designated office of regional rail within the T, as well as bus, by the way, but we're talking about rail today mostly. So we're looking forward to seeing what that will look like and how Mr. Poftak has designed that. But one of the, as Josh pointed out, one of the Phase 1 elements includes the corridor, the environmental justice corridor, linking Lynn to downtown Boston. And I wanted to ask you, first of all, what do you think? How did you react to that? How is it that the legislature and the Senate can be supportive of that? And how do you see that in the larger context of mobility within the sort of inner greater Boston area?
Well, first, let me just say thank you both to Josh and Jim for your work in Transit Matters. It's certainly a very valuable voice and resource for us in the legislature, and also, having worked for now Mayor McGee and Senator McGee with you, Jim, for a number of years, certainly an honor to continue Mayor McGee's push, and he's been playing an active role in this as well. I don't think he's wanted to let go of the transportation, mantle too quickly. But for us on, I was going to say in the North Shore, but really any area surrounding Boston, congestion's at, the breaking point, and it has been for quite some time. But more and more studies that we look at in the work that you've done really highlight the need to get cars off the road and to get people back on rail and to revision really our commuter rail system. For the longest time, over 100 years, we've been pushing for rapid transit to Lynn via the Blue Line, and it's something we had pushed hard for last year to get a feasibility study in the works, in which we're happy to have that passed. But at the same end, with this larger look and revisioning of our rail system, we saw an opportunity to really highlight the need along this corridor, but also, really throughout Greater Boston for affordable and more frequent service, in doing it in a responsible way that's going to be sustainable for the long term in terms of electrification. So I think we have a very strong case to be made, and I think the board recognizes that.
I think it's important that people understand that the Phase 1, in particular in this line, the EJ line, it's really about a couple of things. It's about improving people's access to jobs, to schools, to hospitals, to the basic elements that make up a quality of life. It's also about cleaning the environment, of replacing dirty diesels with modern electric powered systems. And particularly in this, I call it inner core environment of Lynn and Revere, East Boston, Saugus, that part of the inner core, these are really critical issues. People have been living with the impacts of any kinds of increased auto emissions due to congestion. And in the Revere, East Boston environment, probably even in Lynn, there's emissions from airplane travel. And then compounding that of the diesel locomotives that currently power the commuter rail system. So this becomes both about getting people access to what's really important to them and also about improving generally the air quality and the quality of their lives.
Absolutely, and that's, we phrased it the environmental justice corridor, not just for, catch line, but to, really emphasize the amount of emissions and how these communities, lower income communities abutting this commuter rail, all that they will ever know of rapid transit on the North Shore is, the diesel emissions that spew from our commuter rail trains, the congestion along Route 1A, not to mention the Logan Airport component of it. $7 a fare to get from Lynn to Boston. Most folks in Lynn will never use a commuter rail at that rate, yet they will still deal with the environmental consequences of the congestion and of the trains and industrial areas surrounding them.
And these issues are linked, and I want to be really clear about it. The EMU, the electric multiple vehicle, when you compare it to the diesel, not only does it not pollute, it works better. It's cheaper to maintain. It doesn't break down anywhere near as much. The mean distance between failures of an EMU versus a diesel is a vast differential. And so we're talking about something that will end up saving money in the long run, cleaning the air, being much more reliable, and therefore providing people with that frequency, predictability, and reliability that they really need to count on. We talk a lot, people say, the congestion that's gripping our environment within Metro Boston requires us to think about modal shift, how do you get some people out of their cars and onto rail? The answer is, one of the things you need to do is give them a good alternative, right? Give them that frequent all-day service. So if someone from Lynn wants to take commuter rail but is worried because they've got a kid that may be sick coming home from school, they want to get home in a hurry. If they had 15-minute frequencies on commuter rail, they're going to be comfortable. If they don't think that anything's going to happen other than they're stranded, they're going to drive, right? And that's a cost and a burden on them and on everyone else if that car is on the road.
So I wanted to ask a question. Getting into the FMCB has made a recommendation. They decided, they resolved to do this, but in some ways it's an unfunded mandate. Things are going to be kicked over to the Senate and to the House to figure out how to fund this. So there's some next steps to consider. I think the first question I wanted to ask is, a very successful push from the electeds on the North Shore and the communities on the North Shore to make this happen. I don't think necessarily everybody thought that the EJ corridor would be chosen as the first one. I think there's a lot of reasons why it's a good choice, but there's also some complications there. So I guess my first question is, what is it about this that will be transformational for your community? And if we were going to play a cost benefit, how does the EJ corridor fit in as a cost benefit in the region, and why do you think that's a good choice? Of the menu of choices maybe that we have.
Thanks, Josh. So I think when you look at the successful push of the Fairmont line, obviously the Providence line is a little different in that it's more focused on how quickly it could be electrified, but the Fairmont line, while we're a little further away, we're still, less than 10 miles away. I can look out from my neighborhood and see Boston, yet you can't get there quickly. So I think the proximity, you look at the income levels surrounding these communities, the need for a more affordable fare, again, $7 for a one-way trip, not to mention parking and additional transfers as well. And then to Jim's point on reliability and frequency. In Lynn, there are express trains that fly by us, so our constituents sit there and watch these trains from other communities, and not disparaging them, some of which I represent, but they're flying through, and oftentimes when those trains show up in Lynn, they are full, they're at capacity, and some of my staff, will take the commuter rail from time to time. If they miss a train and have to wait a half an hour, or depending on the time of day, much later than that, I'm not going to fire them. But the average worker doesn't have as nice a boss as I am to, accept those shortcomings of our rail system. So if we're serious about getting folks out of their cars, it needs to be reliable. It needs to be more frequent. Folks aren't working 9 to 5, all the time. That those peak hours, there is service there, somewhat frequent, but it needs to be throughout the day. So I think just, again, if we're competing with other, I would like to see the entire system, but I think when you're talking about, a number of folks want us to take a larger look, and let's study this more and look. I think overall, maybe not every commuter rail station needs, that type of frequency or needs that exact price point, but let's get started somewhere. We've been pushing for this for over 100 years in the form of the Blue Line. It's, the same argument's been made over and over again. There's no need to study this much further than just looking at the data that exists now.
Do you think that there's an appetite in the legislature now? I know you probably talk more of the Senate than the House, but are we at a point where there's an appetite that the legislature would see what the FMCB has done and support it and think about, how do we take this opportunity moment and provide it with the sort of revenue funding support that we need? We hear a lot about, both the president and the speaker being really committed to doing something meaningful this year. What's your take on it?
So, from my conversations with my Senate colleagues, I think, folks are generally supportive of, moving forward this. You had asked about the revenue too. Sorry, I skipped over that, Josh. I think, there's an opportunity this year. Obviously, both branches are talking about the need for revenue, and there's a Senate working group, and I don't want to step on the toes of Senator Boncory, who's been tremendous on this and other issues. Oh, good. Well, he can add more to that, but it's definitely one of the top priorities, and I imagine through taking up the transportation bond bill or whatever we do on revenue, that there are certainly vehicles that have legs this year to tackle, some of the recommendations or resolutions from the control board. So the time is now. I don't think we can afford to wait. I don't want to, continue to study this. I'm excited to hear the update from the GM soon. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, we're going to have to keep fighting for it. It's, I don't know that we haven't received a set timeline on any of this stuff yet. And I think we really need to hold folks accountable, both in the building but also outside organizations such as yours.
And so you have filed a bunch of bills that I think are really quite both timely and really, really good. Both, correct me if I'm wrong, redefining the Metropolitan Highway System, which I think is an essential component to creating regional equity and providing funding sources for some of what we're talking about and reducing congestion. And I think you've also filed some bills that relate to ride-hailing companies, TNC. Well, you talk about that a little bit, particularly the redefining of the for listeners who don't understand, the Metropolitan Highway System was created back in the middle of the 1990s as the first way to think about funding and financing the components of the urban system that the Central Artery Tunnel Project was building. So today, the Metropolitan Highway System is the turnpike from 128 into Boston and the harbor crossings, the Tobin, the Sumner, and the Callahan. Today's Metropolitan Highway System, if you were to define it accurately, is a lot more than that. One of the downsides of the current system, and I think the Senate President has been vocal about this, and I agree with her, is it's completely inequitable from a regional perspective. and it's just not up to the task. So this mid-1990s legislation really needs a refresh. And I know you have led in thinking through what that would look like. Maybe we can talk about that a little bit.
Absolutely. No, that's a great description, much better than I could have put it. And again, I made my career off of stealing good ideas from other people. This was both Senator McGee and Senate President Spilka, bills in the past, but more or less in the Metro West, in Senator Spilka's case, and on the North Shore, we pay tolls. We've paid tolls on the Tobin and the Sumner and the Ted Williams, coming in from the Pike. I have no objection whatsoever to paying tolls. I think we need to increase revenue for transportation in a big way, but for us on the North Shore, we believe that it should be a more equitable system in getting past the definitions of our old highway system and expanding that. So one of the bills, just generally the bills would, encourage and in some ways force MassDOT to take a more holistic approach, more equitable approach to tolling and to explore all different tolling options. Technology has increased significantly since these parameters were set. There's, a number of different ways to look at tolling, and I know the Senate Working Group as well as the committee are taking a serious look at that. On the TNC front, again, not a new idea, but I think we didn't fully realize when we were developing our rideshare legislation a couple of years ago how big of an impact they would have on our roads in Massachusetts. And I'm not against ride-hailing services. I use them fairly regularly, but they need to pay their fair share in terms of the impact that they're having on congestion and on our roads. So our bill, a few different bills out there, would just set it at the sales tax and provide discounts for ride sharing to take more cars off the road.
So we talked about transportation funding a little bit, and there's kind of two other issues that I see that are really coming into the mix that are kind of urgent as far as maybe even getting them done this session. One is governance, and then governance at a larger scale, even getting into the regional transit authorities, which is something that the last two-year session, the legislature was really trying to figure out, how do we get some accountability, and then what are we going to do next time with the next time that we have a two-year bill. So what are your thoughts as far as consolidation of ideas and willingness to act on these two areas?
I may have to pass on this one, Josh. I'm certainly. I think we need to make adjustments. I do defer to the Senate chair is kind of leading these discussions on it. I'll be honest. I haven't been as involved in that end of the discussion, but there needs to be those components in play if we want to move these things forward to get any of this done. I'm excited to move forward with it, but I think the details still need to be worked out a bit.
What are you hearing from people in your district about their anxieties about things like congestion and mobility? How does it bubble? We talk about it because we're focused on it, we're passionate about it, we experience it as users of the system. But you're more in touch with, the typical average citizen who's just trying to make it go of it every day. How are you experiencing this affecting them? What I mean by this chronic traffic congestion, this chronic unreliable commuter rail system, this failure to connect the Blue Line to Lynn. How is it affecting real people in your district every day?
I'd say, up there with education and housing, this is the biggest issue people are facing. When we talk about transportation, for the longest time, it was, kind of more generally, we need to invest more, across the board. Now it's all about the traffic. It's all about the congestion. And it's whether you're a business trying to get your employees to a certain destination, or if you're the mother picking up or father picking up your, kid at school. Everyone's experiencing it, and there's a wide range of factors. It's not just, TNCs. It's not just the good economy. It's not just more cars on the road, but the anxiety people are feeling is real, and I think that presents an opportunity for us because you have 200 members in the legislature. It's often difficult to take votes to increase revenue or to come up with bold decisions on this. But when, every elected official is hearing this as a top issue in their district, the need to act is now and not in just an incremental way. This needs to be a big. Sorry.
That's all right. No, I'm sorry. I'm just wondering if you've thought about Senator Lesser has filed a bill on regional ballot initiatives. And I know because I've talked to Mayor Driscoll and McGee and Mayor Cahill, I think those three in particular would be really interested. And the mayor of Boston, in his speech this week, said he supported it. I think there's a lot of municipal support for saying, give us some tools, and it's not going to solve everything, but we can do some things, right? What's your judgment about that bill and where it? I know there's been some pushback in the House, I think, in the past, but is there a chance that advocates can be helpful in getting something like that enacted into law?
Absolutely, and for me, I think it's a no-brainer, and I'm a former state rep as well, so not to disparage anybody, but the Senate has passed it twice. I think there's an appetite to do it again. I don't, for any of these local options, let's allow them to, if they want to raise the revenue and provide better transportation for their districts, why not? It will help the overall region and state as well. So I'm very supportive of that.
I have the impression that some of the pushback came because some people thought, well, wait a minute, if you do regional ballot initiatives, Boston, Cambridge, Quincy, Somerville, they're going to have a lot of revenue sources to tap into. Leominster, Amherst, maybe not so much. So why is this fair? I think there's a way to say, look, you could set aside X percent of the revenue from the quote-unquote wealthier communities as a fund to help those communities that don't have that kind of revenue base. So you could think about, and I know that's not in the bill, but I guess I'm tossing out an idea which says if that's a concern, there's a way to sort of resolve it.
No, I think that's an interesting take on it, something I'll think more about. I think just generally, though, if a local community is ponying up more money, just generally that's more money to work with statewide transportation as well.
Yeah, so talking about constituents and their experiences, I'm wondering, in a two-part question, are you beginning to hear from them that they're aware of the regional rail vote? Are they excited about it? Has it broken through sort of all the din of, because we hear about things are going to happen, but then, but we still have to fund it, and then we have to bid it, and we have to build it, and all these things. So are they hearing about it? And then the second part of that is, what are you telling them, or what would you tell people to, how they can help make it come to fruition?
No, it's a great point. And while we were very excited over the vote, and it was somewhat unexpected that quickly, that we're not spiking the football by any means. This was a great first step. So we've made it very clear to all of our outreach throughout the district that this is a big deal. It's a big deal to be included, but there's still more work to be done in terms of the funding, in terms of making sure that the state is held accountable and in a timely way, right? People have been hearing about the Blue Line on the North Shore for 100 years, so everyone is skeptical anytime you come and say there's near rapid transit or rapid transit on its way. I think there's still that level of skepticism by many, but the fares and frequency, again, it's enough to get a lot of folks on the North Shore out of their cars. So they're excited about that. Now the big question is when. That's the next follow-up. When can we expect this? I'd also say, too, just in terms of the housing issue is, completely related with our, transportation problem and trying to build, transit-oriented development. Hearing from economic development folks that they want to know. This is the way they can get financing to build in Lynn and other gateway cities by having some commitment towards near rapid transit.
Lynn is about to be, and really, I guess we can go back to the legislature. This can happen as quick as the legislature sort of has the ability to mandate and fund for it to happen, within reason. But one of the reasons it's really exciting for your constituency is they're about to get closer to Boston. Like they're not very far away, but it feels everybody. Oh, the North Shore. I'm not from the North Shore. It's so far away. We go there to the beach in the summer, but it's a long day trip. You're about to become very close. And one of the other issues that you run into there, besides just the train, is the bus, which we haven't talked about today yet. But that was one of the resolutions adopted by the control board. And your constituency gets both MBTA bus service and commuter rail service, and maybe because of how unreliable or how infrequent the schedule is and the expense, you may have more constituents talking to you about the bus on a day-to-day basis. I'm not really sure, but what do you hear about the bus and that the excitement around that?
There's definitely an excitement in terms of creating more rapid or more frequent bus service along major corridors. We're working right now with the Lynn Transit Action Plan. The state had designated Lynn and made us eligible for a year-long kind of review of our different transit services, and buses really, stood out. Obviously, over in Everett, that was one of the results of their transit action plan, dedicated lanes and such. So we're still working through that. It's kind of early on, but bus needs to be a part of this. I was pleased that that was an added resolution, and it's also something that could happen. I'm talking about near rapid transit in the near term. Bus could happen. Bus improvements could happen much more quickly. I should also mention water transportation, which in Lynn we had a pilot program a number of years ago that exceeded our expectations. The 2-year pilot, just seasonal, very limited marketing, very limited scheduling, but we have a state-of-the-art ferry terminal in the city of Lynn that we have not been able to get operating funds from the state. And when we're talking about getting cars off the road from Marblehead to Swampscott to Nahat through Lynn, if you're coming down 1A, you're coming down the limit, you're driving right past a ferry terminal that could get you to Boston in 30 minutes. So instead of the hour that from that point it would take you to get in. We certainly believe that could also be a piece for short dollars as well. When you look at Hingham and all the success they've had there, when you look at the population growth, which I haven't talked about much on the North Shore, we're going to be well over 100,000, I think, at the next census in Lynn, and with thousands of units being developed in Revere, not to mention, the Suffolk Downs, 10,000, housing units in addition to office space. In Lynn, we have 1,000 units, permitted and shovels in the ground. That road is already congested. It's only going to get worse. So whether it's bus, ferry, near rapid transit on the commuter rail, all of these things need to be part of the
And
solution.
by the way, you just mentioned Suffolk Downs. I'll just say it because it needs to be said. If you want people in Lynn and places like in that area of the North Shore, near North Shore, to be able to access the jobs that are going to be created at Suffolk Downs, you need to connect the Blue Line to Lynn, period, right? Now, there are ways to do it, and I don't know. I'm sort of agnostic these days. I'm sort of thinking path of least resistance. Maybe it's a connection at Wonderland, and there's a little bit of a move. I think it would work. I think it might be the path of least resistance. But the idea that we're going to build not just the housing, but there will be real new jobs, good jobs at Suffolk Downs, and deprive people in Lynn and other areas and so close of an easy Blue Line ride, it just doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense for equity purposes, for economic development purposes. It is as bad an idea as not building early West Station at Alston, which is going to be depriving people from everywhere west, Newton, Natick, Framingham, Worcester, of access to jobs in Kendall Square. And if we're serious about wanting to grow jobs and making it easier for people to get to those jobs and have a family life, we got to give them these transit and rail alternatives.
No, I couldn't agree more. It's a great point. And, I'm a little bit agnostic in how we make that connection now, too. For a long time, it was straight Blue Line to Lynn. However we can connect to that corridor will be huge. We need to do it. And I failed to mention, Amazon opening up at the old Necco site that abuts the commuter rail, which thousands of jobs. Again, jobs that folks in Lynn could be using. And it's not just about getting folks to Boston. We call it the EJ corridor. It's Chelsea, it's Revere, it's Everett. There are jobs, from folks going from Lynn to those communities and also vice versa. There's definitely a lot of synergy there, and let's just make it easier to get back and forth.
I think EJ in this context means both environmental justice and economic justice.
I think the few of the things that we talked about was making me think, man, the local ballot initiatives are going to be great for a lot of these. You mentioned the ferry. And we talked about bus, and there's a lot on both sides that for what we're going to call small money that can be done at the local level to really show the initiative of the local constituencies to say, well, we're willing to put some money towards that to make those street improvements to help the buses move faster, or the traffic signal improvements, or whatever it is, or subsidize part of the ferry like some other towns have been able to do. There's a lot of opportunities, especially in a denser corridor, like what you represent, to bring a lot of good services to your constituents. Because definitely the North Shore. I mean, we're not going to have Blue Line to Lynn obviously overnight. It's going to be, I think it's going to continue to be an all of the above kind of situation where there's a lot of different ways that we can help people have the options that they need on the North Shore. You mentioned something about developers and being able, and transit being something that could help pencil out development happening. Are you seeing in Lynn a lot of opportunities for transit-oriented development or infill development and added population near these transit hubs, or what are going to be regional rail hubs?
Absolutely. So right now we have 10 stories of housing, which when I was on the city council, everyone said you're not getting over 5 or 6 stories of housing here. The economics just don't work with it. 10 stories going up on Monroe Street, which abuts the commuter rail station. You have 348 units on the waterfront, which will have a boardwalk connecting it to the ferry. The old GE site, which GE used to employ over 20,000 people on the land, it's down to a few thousand, though hopefully growing, but it's a huge site. I guess you can't see a map on podcast, but it's a huge site. Thousands of units permitted. I mean, it's a very big, bold development, but actually on a commuter rail stop. So in Lynn, you have Central Square, but also a flag stop at the GE River Works from when it used to be a far more robust plant. So all those sites are dependent. I mean, if you looked at a map of Lynn's waterfront, it's not developed yet. Each site is really a walkable distance for the commuter rail to bus or to ferry. So it could really help ease some of the crisis we're facing in terms of housing production as well.
Well, I think we can give you an opportunity if you want to have a last word. Anything you want us to leave on?
No, I just want to thank you for all your great work in this. And again, just to stress that while we made progress in this, it's going to be a fight, I think, both on the revenue side of things, but also holding folks accountable and holding them to a schedule that's both reasonable but also bold to meet these challenges, because this isn't something we can deal with. Hear more on the TCI, and that's years from now. We need to tackle this now with serious revenue and a serious game plan.
Well, Senator, my message to you and to your colleagues is not just us, but I think many thousands, and I mean thousands of people who support not the Transit Matters agenda and the advocacy agenda are there to have your back. And we will have your back, and we'll be working very hard to support you and others who are thinking about these issues, acting on these issues, and we're looking forward to a really productive year. Thank you.
Great. Thanks a lot.